Hi, I'm Dorothy. Are you ready to dive deep into one of the bougiest zip codes in the country? The good, the bad, the ups and downs, the real and the not so real. This is That Greenwich Life. First, I'd like to thank our episode sponsors. Jaja Pet by Janet is the stress-free groomer in Greenwich for your precious pups. I take my golden doodle Bleecker there, and he plays with all the other dogs the whole time instead of being locked up in a crate, and he looks and smells amazing when he leaves. The name Zhao Zhao means happy place, and that's what it is. For more info, visit jaujapet.com and at Jaja Pet by Janet on Instagram. We all want glowing skin, and that's why I go to Medical Aesthetics PA Naomi Fisher. She specializes in Morpheus, microneedling, aquagold facials, IPL, and more, and she's teamed up with Dr. Katie's Wellness Insights practice in Darien, so every issue gets treated from the inside out. Book an appointment at wellnessinsights.com and mention That Greenwich Life for 10% off. Hi, I'm Dorothy Cascerceri Simone, and welcome back to another episode of That Greenwich Life. Thank you so much for joining me again this week, and also big thank you to Pod Populi Studios for having me again. Today, I have a very special guest in the Greenwich, Connecticut studio, my dear friend and the creator of the fabulous coaching business, Clear Space for Joy. I'm joined today by Julie Vincent. Hi, Julie.
Hi.
Julie is a mindset and wellness coach, a yoga and meditation instructor, and you have to hear about Clear Space for Joy because it's such a fabulous concept, and it's what we're going to be talking about today. So when I first thought about having Julie on the show, the whole reason I thought she would be the perfect guest is because we're in the middle of summer madness. We kind of tend to think that, all of these different seasons of life are really crazy, right? Like the end of the school year is crazy. Like people have a crazy period of time at work. And then now it's the summertime and we're crazier than ever. And in the midst of all of the really wonderful things in the summer, vacations and going to the beach and parties and outdoor barbecues, we're busy, but there's such a thing as being too busy and toxic happiness seeking, toxic joy seeking. So we're going to talk about that today. But first, I want to start by asking Julie, because she is the joy expert. How does it feel to be the joy expert? It's like some people are grief experts, and that's very helpful too to this world. But to be a joy expert, that's really a gift.
Yeah, it feels pretty good. I think it's my life's purpose.
Yes, I think it is too. So let's talk about kind of the difference between joy and happiness, because joy is something that we probably don't even realize we're not getting enough of and we're not seeking enough of in our life. And hopefully by the end of this episode, viewers and listeners will have a chance to, I'm so used to saying viewers because I had a career in television for over a decade, but viewers and listeners will have an opportunity to find out ways that they can find more joy in their life, right?
Right. I think joy is something that people think of often when it comes to children, but don't think about as adults.
Ooh, that's an interesting point. So it's almost like children are so joyful and innocent, and as adults, we just don't have time for joy. We're just all miserable and
we don't prioritize
walking around with a chip on our shoulder.
We don't prioritize it, but I am of the belief that joy is actually the key to feeling ultimately the best you possibly can.
Definitely.
It's key to wellness. It's a secret ingredient, as I always say.
Definitely.
And I think it's something that is really an everyday thing versus the idea of looking for happiness, which is something that's like an ultimate goal that is hard, kind of unattainable in a way, if you really think about it, right?
Well, sometimes our ultimate, like our happiness is tied up in certain conditions.
That's right.
But joy is kind of unconditional, right?
Oh, I love that. I'm going to use that. Yes, it is. Right. And I think joy can be found in, it's a choice, right? Joy can be found in every single day. It can be found in just tiny drips of things that we focus on intentionally and mindfully every day.
Definitely. I also find that sometimes we use happy as a label. Like we use it as a label to describe us. Like, how are you doing today? Like I'm feeling really happy or I'm feeling really sad. But joy is really something that's a little bit more tangible,
Ooh,
right?
Yes,
it's not necessarily an adjective. I mean, we can feel joyful, right?
Right.
But I think it's interesting because when we set our sights on certain things and they're not happening for us, this is a big theme of That Greenwich Life. This is something that I like to touch on because it really applies to anyone who's listening. Everybody has something right now that they wish could be different in their life, something that they've been trying to change, something that's not budging, something that they're stuck in, right? And when we set our sights on these types of things, we end up feeling unhappy. And I think in talking about joy, I think one thing that I've learned the most from my very hard situation, which I have talked about and I will talk about more in depth, I think I've learned that when you're going through something dark and you're going through something where you can't attain what you want, there is still so much joy to be found throughout the day.
Absolutely.
I don't know
it's what gets you through.
It's what gets you through. And I don't know if I realized that before I went through what I call the dark night of the soul. Just for anyone who's tuning in for the first time, I went through a very, very difficult 4+ years of infertility and very traumatic pregnancy loss. I lost a baby at 21 weeks. I'm going to talk about this more in depth, but I think when you go through something so dark like that, you really just look anywhere for light. And I think prior to that, I don't know if I was really tapping into the simple joys of the day to day.
Right. The appreciation of that.
Right.
The gratitude.
Exactly.
The noticing.
Yep.
The presence.
Yep, definitely. So I think, when you are coaching people to clear space for joy, right? I love that, clear space, because I've talked about this before on past episodes. Until we slow down, we're not able to really tap into the true beauty of our life.
That's right.
So what are some of the ways that you encourage people to clear space for joy?
I think slowing down is one of them. I always say the power of the pause. So getting people to have the awareness that they might be on autopilot and sort of starting to think about, how can I pause, stop, and then make a choice, as opposed to just doing things that I think I should be doing, getting off this, shoulding ourselves.
Yep. The evil
train.
Should.
Right.
The evil should. Because
Right.
we always say, I should have done this. I should be doing this.
And as a, yoga and meditation instructor, I do a lot of teaching about building awareness and practicing mindfulness in our days, right? So it's all about, how do I become more aware of the things that I'm doing, the ways that I'm thinking, and starting to more mindfully make choices to find and appreciate the things that, I want in my days. We basically need to architect our days to fill them with the joy.
That's right. That's a really good point. Architect our days. I like that. So give us an example. I'm just thinking off the top of my head of the most recent example for me of just, what you call a joy drip, which I love that. Where I was driving into my driveway with 1,000 things on my mind. And I looked at my 3 beautiful hydrangea bushes, and I don't know what's happening right now with the weather, but it seems like all the hydrangeas are looking so gorgeous. And I just looked at them and looked at the beautiful colors and how much they were blooming, and it filled me with so much joy in the midst of a lot of like a very active mental state.
Yeah.
And so give us some examples for you.
Yeah. I think nature is a big one for me. And in particular, in this season of summer, oftentimes in the morning when I wake up and go downstairs to start the whole treadmill of the breakfast and making the snack and lunches for my kids, I open the back door and I almost always hear this tiny little bird have this crazy loud sing-song. And I stand there for a moment, go outside, appreciate that noise, listen to it, breathe deeply, take just a few moments of joy before the madness starts.
Right, exactly.
Right?
Yep.
That's, a great example. Also, my family loves to do dance parties in our kitchen, whether it's in the, morning for breakfast or in the evening when we're preparing food or after dinner. And just putting on a great playlist of music that we all enjoy and appreciate that makes us dance. Oftentimes we're running around and dancing with each other. And that's just a tiny little thing that we can do to feel some joy in our day.
And I love the juxtaposition of the 2 examples you just gave, because I think this is very important. Finding a moment of joy can be a very quiet thing, and it can be a very loud
Absolutely.
thing. So your kids, so you have 2 kids. Yep. Your son, Cooper, is my son's age. And we're going to talk about our vacation that we went on with them. And then your daughter is 5. 6. Oh my gosh, she's 6 now.
Yeah.
But anyway, so the idea that joy can be found in the super quiet when you're by yourself listening to a bird sing its morning tune, or the extremely loud, watching your kids dance and turning the volume up on some, song. I'm just like, for some reason in my mind, I'm thinking of like Gangnam Style, like when my son loves turning that song all the way up and it's so loud. But that is really the beauty of joy that people, I think, don't realize. It can be found in the really quiet and the small and the really loud as well.
Right. That's a great point.
Yeah.
And I do help people when I do coach with them, come up with a joy menu. So what is it that joy means to you? Because oftentimes we think it should look like one way or the other, or we see someone being joyful and we think that, that should be what our joy feels like. But joy is so deeply personal.
It is deeply personal. That's a good point.
And so really giving some thought to what does joy mean to you?
Right.
And it can be something so tiny, or it could be something really big, like a joyful vacation,
Definitely.
But when we're talking about dripping it in our days, what does that mean? Well, what does your week look like? What does your day look like? And what are the opportunities that exist for you?
Definitely. I want to talk a little bit about the difference between finding joy and toxic joy seeking.
Yeah.
But it's almost not joy seeking. It's really fun seeking, because joy, I think, is so precious and it's almost immune to toxicity. But I think when people overdo it, so toxic fun seeking and happiness seeking, people who are constantly planning, things like, oh, I'm going to a concert on Monday night and then I'm going on a vacation Tuesday through Thursday and then I'm coming back and then I'm going to this party. It doesn't sound that far from our lives. Now that I'm saying it, there's nothing wrong with doing a lot of fun things. And sometimes in life, some periods are busier with fun things than others. But, talk about kind of this idea that some people are actively seeking joy in an unhealthy way.
Yeah.
Maybe it's their idea of joy that is warped.
Well, I almost often start with, what is it that you're avoiding?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
So when you're trying to constantly be busy and plan things with other people and you're seeking something outside of yourself, what is it inside of yourself that you're avoiding?
Right. What are you running from?
What are you running from? Right. So is it feelings? Is it not wanting to deal with something? Is it a challenge that you're experiencing in your life? And then working with people through that to break it down and find ways to, take small steps to work through that, so that when you do have the fun, you truly can appreciate it versus feeling like you're just running to the next thing.
That's a really good point, because we can become so overprogrammed and we can be walking around on autopilot. Mm-hmm. So then we end up going to the concert that we bought tickets for 6 months ago, and we're so stressed out getting there that once we get there, our nervous systems are so jacked up that we're not even able to really enjoy the music and be in the present moment, because then maybe the next morning we have to pack up and leave to go somewhere.
Right.
So
that brings me to a point about rushing. Like, I feel like as parents in particular, and also when you're overscheduled and you're feeling like you're just trying to do all the fun things, are you rushing from one thing to the next? And that rush depletes the joy from all of it.
It absolutely does. I love this point. I just did an episode on rushing women's syndrome, which I hate to call it that because the men suffer from it too.
Sure.
Rushing men syndrome, we'll call it. And it's a really important thing to think about, because the way that joy falls into this whole conversation of that episode that I did is the fact that you're right. You can't find the joy, the simple joys, if you're rushing around from one thing to the next. Mm-hmm. So I think slowing down the schedule is definitely very important.
Yeah.
Now let's talk a little bit about how joy can help someone who is going through a really difficult time. Yeah. Which I always say this, we all, I believe, are going through something. Yeah. I don't think that there are these periods of life that are reserved for, well, now this is going to be your really difficult time and you're going to carry this really heavy thing. I think we all are dealing with heavy things, probably on the regular.
Sure.
But how is joy something that we can use to help us through those times?
Yeah, I think it helps us lighten those feelings. I think it helps us when we can feel joyful and then a challenge comes up, we know what we want to feel. So we can, do the things, take the small steps to get back to a more balanced state.
Mm-hmm.
I think, feeling like silliness and lightheartedness in times of challenge can really just make us feel better, despite knowing that you're still working on something,
Well, that reminds me so much of this epic vacation that we took our boys on 2 summers ago. Mm-hmm. We went to Portugal, to a really special place in Portugal called the Azores. I don't know what.
Azores.
It's like different people pronounce it differently. So this is a little cluster of islands in the Atlantic Ocean. It's actually the very first point that you can reach touchdown in Europe. Mm-hmm. You can, so there's direct flights. We flew direct out of Newark, New Jersey, which was great. It's a really, really quick flight. And they call it the Hawaii of Europe.
Yep.
Because it truly is like Hawaii, with tons of microclimates, many, many rainbows. I'm pretty sure our boys have. Julie's laughing because this humongous rainbow appeared, and we were screaming. We were driving in the car, and we were screaming at the top of our lungs with our boys in the back seat about this rainbow. And I'm pretty sure that we created a core memory. Like, our boys
Absolutely.
will never look at a rainbow.
Well, because you and I look at life that way, right?
We
We appreciate those things, especially in nature. And I think we were just like, how is there a rainbow like this immediately as we touched down driving to our hotel?
Yes, exactly. But the reason I'm bringing this trip up and the concept of joy and how that played in is because I think many of us lack the ability to hold duality. And what does that mean? It means when you're dealing with something hard, difficult, confusing, painful, it means that you also are able to find joy throughout the day. You're also able to find the positive in your life, and you're able to say, not today was such a bad day, but maybe today had some really bad or hard things about it, but there were also some really beautiful and great things about it. Holding duality is not something that I learned until much, much later in life, probably only a few years ago, through this difficult process that I went through. And so in talking about this vacation that we took, circling back to that with the boys, I was pregnant at the time. And this was my 5th pregnancy in about 4 years, that's, if you know about pregnancy, that's a lot of times being pregnant in a short period of life. It was my 5th pregnancy in thinking that I probably wouldn't even meet that baby. I had been through a tremendous amount of loss every pregnancy that I had, with the exception of my son, who's 8 now. In those 4 years, resulted in a very traumatic loss. And so when we were going on this trip, we planned the trip before I got pregnant. Mm-hmm. I had no idea. I had kind of closed the book very reluctantly on trying to have another baby, because it had been such a long, strenuous journey, and I was really dying inside. And then I suddenly became pregnant. But anyway,
I think you called me like a couple days before we went away and said,
I did.
I'm actually pregnant, like 4 days pregnant.
I did. And I don't know if you remember, but I said to you, I'm telling you this because it's information that you need to have, because we're leaving to go to Portugal together. But if you want to be my friend, please don't ask me about it, and please don't bring it up. And coming from somebody who talks about everything, that was a very rare thing for me to tell you and to tell some of my other friends at the time. Like, you think you'll be a good friend asking me how I'm doing and how I'm dealing with it, but frankly, you're going to be a good friend just
sort
not
of
bringing it up. Act as if.
Yeah.
And so on this trip, we had these amazing excursions planned with our sons. And one of them was canyoning, which, just side note, Julie thought the whole time was canoeing. Okay.
Don't ask me why. I just read it wrong.
So for anybody who's never been canyoning, because this was my first time, and you don't know what canyoning is, it's quite different than canoeing. You basically put on these wetsuits, helmets. So that's going to give you an indicator that it's different than canoeing. Like waterproof hiking shoes, and you get yourself all like strapped up and you rappel down waterfalls in these canyons, which are these very kind of narrow, like waterways, cave type. They're
like
not
tropical,
caves. They're not caves because they're not closed overhead, but they're open. But anyway, we had this canyoning trip, and once Julie figured out that it wasn't canoeing, and she still agreed to go on this with me.
I was all in.
Yeah. You know, like normally this is not something that you do when you are pregnant and you just found out that you were pregnant. But at that point I had been through so much that I just felt like I needed to just keep moving forward, because in my mind, that pregnancy, it sounds so bad and it makes me sound like a true pessimist, but it is really a person that had been deeply traumatized and was suffering legitimately from PTSD. I did not think that pregnancy would go any differently than the pregnancies that came before it. And so I felt that I had nothing to lose. Sure. And so we did this canyoning. Oh, and I should also mention that was the one day after we ate all of those little clams in Portugal that I was throwing up all night long. The whole next morning, I drove us to the canyoning. I was a shell of myself. So the point is, right, like these are all the conditions for a very unhappy experience and a very unhappy person. But yet I was able to, with the help of Julie and also with all of the hard work that I had done through this dark time in my life, I was able to really find the joy and the playfulness in jumping off a rock, you know, how high, 15 feet into the water.
Yeah, 15, 20 feet.
Below, right.
I have to say, I think that's one of the most joyful moments of my life.
I 100% agree, and I love that you say that.
Yeah, I think it's my son's too.
I think so too. Well, Nicholas had a little slip. Yeah. I think one of the most joyful points of my life was after Nicholas had his little slip at the top of the jump, which he's jumped from a lot of things, and I've never seen this. I think one of my most joyful moments was when he emerged at the bottom, like the fact that he did not end up hurting himself
smiling,
on that
saying,
rock.
Mom, I'm okay.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. He's like, Mom, I'm okay. I'm like, oh, thank God. But anyway, that trip taught me a lot, because I was in a really rough mindset with this surprise pregnancy that I really didn't have any faith in and that I felt almost traumatized by. But also being able to go and be with you and be with our kids and do these really fun things to really kind of be able to hold the duality of that. Like all the anxiety, all the fear that I was holding. No fear from jumping off of the 15-foot, 20-foot high rock, but all the fear of the pregnancy. Basically just what was it? Like, was it going to work? Was it not? Was I going to start, sorry for this being graphic, but was I going to start bleeding on the trip? I had miscarriages and, very, very scary time for sure. But this stresses the importance of how you can be happy in moments while you also feel sad and all of the anxiety and everything.
I look back on that trip for you and reflect and say, I think that's when you decided to go with the flow.
Thank you.
That's a high compliment. You decided to say, I'm going to just let it all be. You had already let go of the idea of trying to get pregnant again. And then you miraculously got pregnant and you said, you know what, we're still going to go. I'm going to go with the flow, and what's meant to be will be. And you allowed yourself to feel the joy, to be truly present. And look what happened.
Yeah, thank you. That is the highest compliment, because I know anyone who has known me for any portion of my life would never describe me as someone who goes with the flow.
You did.
Okay. Especially the fine folks at Pod Populi who have been producing my show and have been incredible with that. But I think you are right. I think there was a true letting go. Mm-hmm. And the irony is that my doctor, Dr. Cahill, mm-hmm. who we love, who is Julie's doctor also, at Coastal here in Stamford, my doctor actually texted me. I don't know if you remember this. Yes, we were in the car, and he texted me and said all of the initial, what was it, like the MAT21 or the initial blood test that they do, just kind of figuring out if there's anything very wrong. He texted me and said, like, all the blood work came back and it was great. And I have to take a deep breath, like even just saying that, because it gives me anxiety to think about it. But I remember Julie looked at me and said, "Oh my gosh, that's amazing." And I said, "Yes." I said, "It's better than the alternative of him sending me a message of a different type."
Yeah, you wouldn't even let yourself celebrate.
Right, because it still to me didn't mean that the baby was okay or that the baby would be born. And by the way, maybe I've left you in suspense, or maybe you've already figured it out yourself, listeners, but the baby that I was pregnant with in Portugal when we went on this trip, the baby that I was certain that I would not get to meet, that I would not get to bring home to my house, is my daughter, Gemma, who at this moment of us recording this podcast is 15 months old.
Her middle name should have been Azores.
It should have, or Joy. Joy. I call her Gemma Joy. Her middle name is,
really?
yes,
I didn't know that.
Her middle name is Susan, after my mother-in-law, which I love and I don't regret. But I call her Gemma Joy because she is the absolute embodiment of all the joy that there is to have in a given day, especially in light of looking back and thinking how really, really hard and tough and difficult a lot of those days were.
Yeah.
So I think joy can be a huge tool for anybody who is having a tough day or having a tough moment right now in life.
Yep.
I have a friend who's having a hard time with her son. And she mentioned to me, that they had a really nice afternoon the other day out in the backyard, just like, playing t-ball or whatever. And that to me was so beautiful, because you take a situation where there's only stress, there's only anxiety, there's only worry, and then you create a moment where there's joy.
Right.
And I also want to talk with you, Julie, because I want to make sure that listeners know you don't have to go on some crazy, extravagant, fabulous trip. Now, I should make a quick note. I almost don't want to. I almost want to gatekeep this because I don't want to tell people. But the Azores in Portugal are this like almost hidden gem of Europe, and not expensive at all. Everything that we did, I remember when I looked back and I was asking you for, the Venmo, everything that we did was so reasonable and so unbelievably incredible. We went whale watching. We went snorkeling with the boys for the first time in this gorgeous area called the Princess Islet. And we did an off-roading day trip all day long in what was it? We were in an
Land Rover.
Yeah, like an old Land Rover. And we swam in all these like thermal pools, and we did all these great things. But this is a really special place if you are looking for summer travel. We stayed at the Pestana Bahia Mar, which is part of the Pestana hotel chains, which I love. They're all over Europe, but the hotel was fabulous. The boys loved the pool.
Perfect family hotel.
The breakfast every morning, except for the morning when I had to get up and run with my hand over my mouth to the bathroom because I was vomiting. The breakfast was amazing. But anyway, I want to drive home the point that you don't actually have to spend a lot of money and go on a vacation to find joy.
Right.
Can you give us a couple examples of joy in your everyday and what that can look like for people of all walks of life, not just the moms who are listening, maybe some of the men who are listening, who are going to work every day. Give us like some examples of where people can look.
So I think it depends on your life, obviously. I think as a parent, I find a lot of joy in my children. Oftentimes I will fight that because I feel like I have this to-do list and these things that I need to get done either for work or to, for our home. But when I do drop my phone, go play soccer with my son or dolls with my daughter, and give it a period of time of say 20 minutes and just be 100% present, I find that there's, like we were referring to at the beginning, so much childlike awe and wonder that we can steal from.
Definitely.
We can really appreciate. And it doesn't have to be that you're playing with your kids, 24/7. It's just these pockets of time where you can really appreciate it.
Children are a huge source of joy. They're also a huge source of stress at times.
100%.
But they are a huge source of joy. And so, if you are a mom, you can look right in your own home for that. And if you're not, everybody has a friend with a child a niece or a nephew. So children are definitely a huge source of joy. I love that.
I love also just, getting outside, whether it's in the middle of summer like we are, there's tons of opportunities for it, or, in the middle of winter, still getting outside and sort of taking deep breaths, really appreciating nature and all of its abundance. And I find a lot of joy in just being outdoors, doing activities, whether it's a walk or a bike ride, skiing, which is, our family's really into, or, really just kind of playing with our kids at the beach or being with just you reading a book, at the pool.
Right.
Those types of moments, when you can carve them out. Again, doesn't have to be a whole heck of a lot of time, but it's really just appreciating that, putting your phone away, being present, being mindful, making choices to, build those things into your weeks.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned two things. I'm glad that you mentioned the beach because these days with taking my 15-month-old to the beach, I may as well just burn my beach chair, like just light it on fire.
You're not sitting down reading a book.
It doesn't need to come with me because I'm not sitting down reading a book. I'm definitely not reading a book, but I'm not even sitting down. But it's funny because we went to the beach the other week and it was such a schlep. I need to get one of those beach wagons.
Yes,
I'm ill-equipped to go to the beach because I don't have a beach wagon. So I'm going to work on that. But I'm schlepping all this stuff. I parked the car. I put it all on the side. Then I double parked the car, put it all, dropped it all off. Then I went and parked the car. I mean, getting to the beach was like a 13-step process for me. And I am happy that it is because I know the alternative of not having this amazing baby. And I know what those days felt like for me. But once I didn't sit down. Remember, my beach chair is gone. It's burnt. It's just a pile of ash.
Once you arrived.
It's just a pile of ash. Once I arrived, I got everything kind of sorted. And actually, my son, Nicholas, was so sweet. He put the umbrella up for me because I didn't know how to do it. My husband wasn't with me. But anyway, once I got everything kind of settled, I then was walking the beach while my daughter was crawling around, trying to crawl like headfirst into the water. This girl is a savage. But anyway, I really just took a moment, even though I was so flustered, I took a moment. And even though I didn't have any sunscreen on myself, because God forbid I put any on my own body, that's why literally I look like Malibu Barbie, the level of sun exposure I've gotten. But I took a moment to just say, you know what? Okay, that was a full day's work. But now I'm here. Mm-hmm. I can hear the sound of the waves crashing. I can feel the breeze off of the water. I can see this adorable little munchkin in her little pink bikini. And, I can see my son playing and I can really just take a moment.
You took a pause.
I took a pause to really get into, to slip into that moment of joy.
Right.
And then she started eating the sand and then I slipped right out real quick.
That's such a good point because we were talking about rushing, like when you rush and you're getting all this stuff and you're flustered and you're on autopilot and you're getting there, it's important that you take that pause to arrive. Yeah. I do that in my classes. Everybody arrives from a different car in traffic and maybe they walked there and they were rushing and whatever. They arrived to the studio and I say, just take a moment now. You're here. You're allowed to be here. This is what you tried to make happen. And you've arrived. So that's a great point.
And the other thing that you mentioned, which I want to touch on, is the fact that you talked about winter and how going outside in winter is a place to really find joy. And
I think we learned that in COVID, right?
I think we did learn that in COVID for sure. I'm pretty certain that for most of my life, I avoided the cold at all costs. I did ski. I did go skiing every so often, but I hated the cold. I don't know if maybe I just never bought the right coat or what was going on. Maybe I needed earmuffs. I don't know. It's like the same as the beach. You need the beach wagon to go to the beach. Like maybe I wasn't gearing up right in the winter, but I think I spent so many mornings and days just sitting outside in the freezing cold during the years that I was going through all of this infertility and all this difficulty, and allowing the cold to really be healing. I mean, there's a whole movement of cold therapy. There's a guy by the name of Wim Hof, and the Wim Hof method is incredible.
Science behind it all.
This is why people are doing cold plunges now, in just bathing, putting themselves in a bath of cold water. So there's a lot of joy to be found in the winter. And so it's not just go outside when the weather's beautiful. The winter can be really beautiful
think about the rain, right? Go put some rain boots on. Go without the umbrella. Stomp in the muddy puddles like Peppa Pig and your daughter,
Right.
And just truly appreciate it. When's the last time you did that? Right?
Yeah, the rain.
You see these people running in the rain and I'm like, oh my God, they're crazy. But they're really not.
No,
Can you imagine how good it feels to actually get that rain on your body? So it's like little things like this, right?
That's right.
And it's reframing it.
Right. And in order to ourselves be able to put on our rain boots or go barefoot or whatever you decide and go out in the rain and stomp around and play, we also have to, for the parents who are listening, we also have to shut off that thought in our mind of telling our kids, like, get out of that puddle, puddle, don't get dirty. You're going to get your shoes wet. We have to kind of override that thought that we have and maybe just let them get wet and let them get dirty.
Well, I think it's really easy as you're growing up in parenting to become uptight, right?
Yes.
When we first met each other in the West Village in New York City, I was a very different parent than I am these days with an almost 9-year-old, you know? And I think that I had all these rules and these things I thought I should be doing, but truly, like, none of that actually matters. Like, let them get dirty, that's where the joy comes from. And you start to realize that. So I think that's a great point.
That's right. Okay. Well, on that note, we are nearing the end of the episode. And as all of my listeners know, the end of the episode means it is time for your weekly work on. Just like we all have our daily and weekly workouts that keep our body in shape, your weekly work on is something to keep your mind in shape and to keep your life in balance. And this week, your weekly work on is I want you to take a much closer look at the mundane in your life. I want you to try to find 1 or 2 moments this week. You have the whole week to do it. So this is actually something that, even though we can't check off all those things on our to-do list, this is something that you can do. I promise you. 1 or 2 times this week between now and when we talk next episode, I want you to look around in the mundane. Not in the really amazing party that you planned or road trip that you planned, but just the mundane, being in your home with whoever you live with. And I want you to really try and take a moment, take a pause, and find some joy. It might be looking out your window and seeing a little bunny hopping by. It might be giving your child a bath, which could sometimes be a little bit of like a tiring exercise.
It could even be doing the laundry.
It could even be doing the laundry and looking at all of these beautiful clothes that you are so lucky to have purchased, that you are so privileged to be able to put on your body and the body of the people in your family.
So I think it's a mindset shift, right? But it's also, how can you maybe upgrade or up-level that mundane task? We read this book in my Mindful Book Club called The Fun Habit. And the author, Mike Rucker, talks about up-leveling these mundane tasks and just adding some fun to them. And I remember the conversation at the end when we were doing our discussion, we were all talking about, like, putting on a podcast or our favorite.
That's right. You could listen to That Greenwich Life while you're doing your laundry.
Or our favorite, music playlist, and really kind of, up-leveling our laundry folder.
Or even FaceTiming with a friend.
I
don't mind if you
both can FaceTime doing our laundry,
right? I don't mind. We can FaceTime and fold our laundry together.
Exactly. So how do you up-level something? I do that oftentimes when I'm cooking family dinner. I'll put on some good music. I'll kind of dance around. I'll call a friend, my mom, someone like that, just to sort of like make it so that I'm not just stirring something.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
So that's a great way to add some joy to
thank
mundane tasks.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you everybody for tuning in this week. So let's talk about how you can find Julie Vincent. She's on Instagram at I am Julie Vincent. You can check out her page. There's so many great inspirational tips that she gives for how to clear space for joy in your own life. And also please follow me at Dorothy on TV. Oh, also, visit Julie's website, clearspaceforjoy.com. If you are interested in one-on-one coaching, she does that. She's local here in Fairfield County, but she does that for anyone, anywhere.
Virtually.
She has clients all over the country. And also, please follow me at Dorothy on TV on Instagram. Please, if you are able to do your weekly work on, which I know you all are, I'm holding you accountable. Please interact with me on Instagram. Tell me what you did. What was your joyful moment? Tell me how it helped you. And please check me out on my website, DorothyOnTV.com. And please, on Apple Podcasts, please write a review. That helps us push this show to even more people. Give it some stars. Drop it into a group chat to get other people listening. And you can listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, wherever you enjoy your shows. And special thank you to this episode's sponsors, Jaja Pet by Janet here in Greenwich, and Medical Aesthetics PA Naomi Fisher. And thank you always to Pod Populi Studios. They take the hard parts out of podcasting so that I can have fun with it. Thank you all so much. And remember, don't just live your life, love it. See you next week.